So this talk is going to be about who wins Ethereum block building auctions and why. And this is a paper we did with Danning from Flashbots and Thomas from Ethereum Foundation. And today we're going to introduce you our findings and so on. So yeah, we kind of all know that the MEV-Boost market is dominated by three builders. Well, back in the days when we did the study, right now 2 builders. But like if you look at their profitability in terms of like their profit margin from each block and like their total profits, and then put this into like a bubble plot, which the size of the bubble also shows like their market share, we get a distribution like this, which we have like Titan, Rsync, and Beaver kind of having these larger bubbles. But we also see these other builders who are like these Anon guys, or like I Can Has block and Thank You for the block, which have much smaller bubbles, which indicate that they have like much less market share, but they're pretty profitable. So then like we know that like the market in its current shape with these 3 builders dominating it is vulnerable to censorship, and we kind of need to have to promote competition in the market or come up with these like censorship resistance preserving solutions. And the point of this paper is like, okay, let's try to understand how do these guys actually win the auction and how they become profitable. And we think like there are different features for both of these aspects, and that's why like we break the question into these 2 parts. And before jumping into our analysis and results, let's briefly remember how the MEV-Boost auction was working. And like how you win the auction actually. And what we know is that from a builder's point of view, like let's say this is t minus 12, so 12 seconds before the block is proposed, the guy has his mempool view, and transactions over time come into his mempool, and each transaction simply pays a transaction fee, so like brings a value to this builder. And we know that this transaction fee plus some other factors like how much profit margin the builder wants to keep, the time in the slot we are, and like subsidy strategies or like other builders' bids kind of get all put into this bidding function, which then simply like outputs the bid that the builder places on the relay. And we know that over time, builders observe other bids and reflect their values because more transactions come into their mempool, maybe through exclusive channels. And at the end of the day, the proposer simply says, okay, I want to now propose this block, so calls this get header endpoint, and this simply returns the highest value block to the proposer. And of course, like to understand how the value simply like increases like this, we need to understand, okay, like where does this value come from? And we know that, yeah, this is coming from these transactions, which are like enumerated right now. But of course, every transaction is not the same. These transactions have different objectives, potentially different transparency levels, whether they were seen in the mempool or exclusively relate to the builder. So then we need to really like identify, okay, like what transactions bid for Ethereum block space today. And then it is going to show our taxonomy for different labels that we introduced. But our main methodology for the paper is simply, it has 2 parts. We first break down the MEV-Boost market. So like we decompose it into 3 parts, like first an overview of the whole market, then looking into specific order flow labels and their like significance. And then finally, we identify different builder strategies. And the whole point is we try to find those features which are associated with being successful in the auction, which means that like, does it have any meaning for winning the auction, like gaining market share, or does it help you with keeping profits? And yeah, this will be the final results that we will share with. So let's start with the MEV-Boost decomposition. So first we look into the builder market. And the first slide that I'm going to show is just going to be focusing on BRT, or Beaver, Rsync, and Titan, and you will see this acronym throughout. And first, let me just put out these 3 charts. And the first one is simply showing their market share over time. And yeah, we know that this is increasing. We find that like on a daily average, they have the 80% of all blocks produced, but this is right now around 90%, I guess. What is more interesting here is potentially this cumulative profits over time. And like this green line is standing for Beaver, the orange is for rsync, and purple is for Titan. And we see that like rsync, although having a higher profit, higher market share than Titan, seems to have less profits here. But of course, take this with a grain of salt, because this is only looking at the on-chain profits. And like if you're an integrated builder potentially profiting from your searcher, well, then this is not currently accounting for that. And then the other thing is, of course, a builder may have payment for order flow deals with providers. So then, yeah, you might be making this much on chain, but you might also be paying back to the provider. So this number may not be super accurate, but it gives us an idea. For example, you can see that like Titan really just takes off from this February onwards, and Danning is going to share a chart about why that might be the case. And one interesting thing here is that if you look at their daily profit margins over time, Beaver and rsync have this more consistent lines every day, but Titan actually has like more dips, like more lows, or even days with negative profit margin overall. And we think this is because like Beaver Build and rsync are known for like running their own searchers, so they have this consistent stream of order flow coming, whereas Titan is more dependent on external providers, so the order flow may not be as consistent. So then they might have these like more fluctuating profit margin over time. And if you look at other builders as well in our study, which like covers from October 2023 to April of this year, so like a 6-month period, we see that like 10 builders overall have around 1% profit, 1% market share, and these 10 builders build around 97.6% of all blocks, but they only actually earn around 83% of the whole profits, which means that there are builders outside this top 10 which, yeah, have small market shares, but they're actually good at making profits, which is also what we show in that first chart. And the rest of the charts, at least in this presentation, is mostly going to focus on the top 10 builders, but actually in the paper, in the appendix sections and so on, you can find the metrics for the other remaining builders as well. So now Danning is going to continue with our taxonomy for the order flow labels.
Right. So we built a system to label out the composition of different aspects of the transaction on a transaction level for these 6 months, all the blocks on Ethereum. We have two, I guess, like separate type. One is transparency labels, one is order flow labels. And so transparency label really is to indicate how private or how exclusive the transactions are. We're using basically the Flashbots mempool dumpster open source data. Whenever we see the transaction was included in one of those public mempool source, we're labeling it as a public signal. And for any transaction that was not seen ever in any of those 6 mempool sources, we'll label it as exclusive or, signal. Caveat here is that it doesn't mean it's really exclusive. We don't know how exclusive it is. It could be private to maybe 1 or 2 searchers or to multiple builders, but it was never seen in the public mempool. And we specifically labeled out OFA bundles aside with these 2 labels, because we think OFA bundles are kind of like different. They are neither a public transaction, because usually the user transactions are sent privately towards a OFA endpoint, but they were seen by some searchers. So they are somewhat public to the set of searchers who are searching on those platforms. And particularly, for example, like MEV-Blocker, they are committed to be a permissionlessly, endpoint. So any searcher can potentially basically subscribe to their stream. So it's somewhat public. So yeah, we try to identify them separately from public and exclusive. And so for order flow labels, we have this 7 big categories, including MEV, Telegram bot flow, solver model, SEX, swap flow, OFA bundle backgrounds, and other. So for MEV, we had a breakdown further to identify if it's atomic arbitrage or non-atomic arbitrage or sandwiching or liquidations, combining with a few data sources, including zero MEV and like a few heuristic data set on Dune, and also our own self-developed heuristics for non-atomic arbitrage, which primarily meaning to indicate SEX-DEX arbitrage. And for Telegram bot flow, we have a data source that covers a wide list of the Telegram bots on Ethereum, including, for example, like Banana Gum, Maestro, and others. Solver model, we covers 1inch Fusion, CowSwap, and Uniswap X. We separate them from the retail swaps because they have a different type of submission process, or like how to say life cycle for compared to all the normal transactions that are submitted by the retail users through wallets. And CEXs are basically all the centralized exchanges who are sending deposits to their users when the user are basically trying to deposit on chain. For example, like Binance and Coinbase's. Swap flow includes first retail swaps, which we are basically trying to identify based on the known routers for the major DEXs or DEX platforms, DEX router aggregators as well. And for other swaps that we are seeing, potentially generically under a Uniswap V2 router or other unknown routers, we will categorize them as just like bot swap. This is potentially capturing also some MEV transactions that were missing from the previous heuristics. And OFA bundle are identified based on the same heuristic we were labeling for the transparency labels, where we basically assume a set of 3 transactions adjacent to each other, where we see user transaction first, and then followed by a searcher background and also a refund transaction. We also extended to consider the case where sometimes the searcher may add their background and refund many transactions afterwards. Mostly we're combining using MEV-Block and Flashbot's MEV share transaction on dataset on Dune. And for all the other transactions that we didn't identify, we'll just simply default to the public or exclusive signal label. So here are some results or data that we observe. The first slides here that we are looking at is basically looking at the transparency label distribution measured by, on the left side, the MEV value, which means like, just to define MEV value here quickly, we're calculating basically all the gas priority fee and also the builder tip, which is basically forwarded through the Coinbase transfer method in MEV-Boost. So combined together, we call them MEV value, which are basically the value paid out to proposer. This may not mean the whole MEV value that the order flow contains, because some of them might be actually taken or pocketed by the builder or the app owners or other sources. And on the right side, this is a gas share. So basically how much gas does these transactions consume, or basically how much block space they take. And the interesting observation here first is it kind of follows a Pareto rule, where you see that the majority of the transactions who are basically labeled as public signal, as the green-blue, are taking up most of the block space, maybe more than 80%, while contributing much less values compared to all the exclusive signals. So basically we're seeing like exclusive signal are providing 60% of all block value, while only taking up 19% of all the block space. And if we look at all the across all the blocks fluctuates, they constitute 71% of all block value in more than 50% of the blocks. And of course, we also see that OFA bundle overall is very much less adopted here, and we barely can see them in the chart. And then the next one is to observe the transparency distribution across different order flow type, across transactions, or and also how much acquisition in terms of like private order flow across different builder on the right side. So on the left side, we're seeing that it's interesting from bottom to the top. We're seeing that the order flow, including non-atomic ARB and other exclusive order flow, sandwiching, atomic ARB, liquidation, which are all MEV transactions, they are pretty much mostly all exclusive signals. So searchers are by default sending those privately towards builders, so to not be seen in the public mempool to reveal their strategies or being attacked or by other people. Another big category we see here is Telegram bots, where they are also showing more than 90% in terms of the value are being sent exclusively. They are able to do this because the users are sharing private key with the Telegram bots, or basically the Telegram bots generates a wallet and preserving the private key for users, submitting transaction for user. That's why they are able to basically submitting transaction for user and decide for user. And besides that, we also see solver model, which is when user goes to potentially Uniswap, 1inch, and CowSwap, they have the options to basically settle their transaction with the solver model, where a bunch of solvers are trying to compete to quote for the best price across different liquidity on DEXs, AMMs, or even like private market makers, where we see that the submission for all these solver model are also dominantly private. And among the rest of the order flow, for example, like retail swap, we can also see around like 15, more than 10% adoption for private order flow, potentially because users are using private RPC to avoid some big slippage causing by the MEV actions. We also see SEX deposits are pretty much all public, just because they're naturally, immune to any like price relevant MEV strategies. So on the right side, we're seeing the builder list from bottom to top ranked by their market share. So the lower they are, the higher market share there are. So Beaver is the highest market share builder here. And we're seeing that generally the builder with more private order flow or basically exclusive signal are going to have a higher market share. And we see that like BRT, the top 3 builders are receiving the highest relative value from exclusive flow, exceeding 65% of their total. And among all the remaining builders, their value can range from 1% to 91%. So here is the next chart where I call it like an order flow treasure map. I think this is an interesting chart for everyone because this is, we're trying to basically break down all the transactions by order flow type, how much MEV value they are paying or contributing towards the proposer revenue, and comparing with the chart on the right side, how much gas share actually they are consuming, or basically how much block space they are consuming. For user, it's interesting, basically this is how much you are paying and or potentially you might be overpaying. For the apps, this might be potentially how much value you're left out on the table, or for anyone or any like team is basically trying to acquire more order flow to increase whatever their builder market share or any other potential value. This is the customer you would want to go after, right? So just to examine the charts here, we're also seeing somewhat like a 80-20 kind of divide. You see the red and the pink are basically retail swap and other public flow, which constitutes around like 70% of block space, but yet they're contributing around like 30% total of MEV value. Meanwhile, we're seeing that the most prominent MEV value from this 6 months data period, it comes from Telegram bots, which is the lighter blue on the left side of the chart. And then the next one as a top value MEV flow is sandwiching. And then next is bot swap. And then the next is non-atomic arbitrage. And among them, you would see that sandwiching and non-atomic arbitrage are really taking up at most 2% of the block space while contributing around 20% each for the MEV value. And we see Telegram bot flow and MEV order flow cumulatively contribute 51% of all the block value while consuming 10% of total gas. And more valuable flow is exclusive submitted and blocks are filled with less valuable public flow. And we also, on the right side, we have a breakdown of all the top builders and their order flow composition breakdown of different type. And we're pretty much seeing that everyone has a various source of order flows, a good diversity of order flow as being the top builders. And the BRT, so basically the top 3 builders, they have significant value coming from the valuable order flow, meaning Telegram bot, sandwiching, bot swap, and non-atomic arb. So here is just another timeline view of all the top 3 builders and what are the significant exclusive order flow provider for them. So basically, when zoom into all the exclusive order flow provider, we identified this 7 order flow providers as the top one of contributing the value. So Jerry from Subway, which is the most famous and like the most successful by profitability, Atomic Searcher, and Banana Gun, Telegram bot, and OFA order flow from Flashbots Protect and MEV Blocker, and Maestro Telegram bot, and SCP's non-atomic ARB, and Wintermute's non-atomic ARB. And we can pretty much see it's very evident that the yellow, which is the SCP flow, are only, seen in the Beaver blocks, and also contributing quite a high amount of MEV value, which is around 20%. And the darker yellow, which is the Wintermute flow, are only seen in the rsync blocks, contributing around 20 to 40% of MEV flow. And we also see that like all these three top builders, they all have generative flow, banana gun flow, and other OFA flow. But we observe that like the orange, which is the banana gun flow, somewhat spiked up around February in Titan's block particularly, which in correlation with their spiking up, profitability charts, which is a dotted line here. Usually cumulative time series is a chart crime, but here I think it's interesting for us to like observe this correlation. So yeah, and Burak will continue with more summary about the builder strategies.
I have this one. Okay. Okay, this is going to be fast. All right, so what we try to do then is that, like, after measuring the significance of the order flow labels and these builder strategies that I'm going to show, we will all tie it to into like finding which ones are correlated with winning the auction and which ones are correlated with making profits. But simply to go over these builder strategies, we identified 4 of them. One of them is block packing. So we look at like which parts of the block provide provide what kind of how prominent value to builders, and we have like top of block indicating the top 10%, body of block the 80% in between, and then end of block is the bottom 10%. And we see that top of the block is providing the most significant value to all top builders except Penguin. And like when we look into like, okay, like what resides in top of block, we see that more than 50% of all exclusive transactions are residing here, providing around 88% of the all exclusive value. And we also see, interestingly, that Titan, Gambit Labs, and Penguin also have a relatively significant end of block value, which could indicate that they allow searching at the end of their blocks. We also see that on the subsidy profiles, some builders like Flashbots or Builder 69 are really not subsidizing, whereas some lower market share builders adopt this subsidy strategy. But we see that profitability is usually also increasing with market share there. And then Danning already talked about exclusive order flow access, so I'm going to skip over that for now. And then we also have some metrics about latency and bidding, and specifically strategies such as cancellations. We observe them to be adopted by, again, by these more successful builders. And if we come to the results, the first result we find is that the diversity of order flow correlates with the market share. So builders who have more diverse order flows, which we calculate using Shannon entropy, also have higher market shares. And this could be potentially because these builders get order flow from different providers, which simply make them more competitive in or competitive more frequently than a builder who only gets order flow from their own searcher or maybe from like a single source, so they can't win the auction that often. And we see that like these smaller market share builders, they usually have like a single order flow label, which is extremely prominent for them. And yeah, we see that this is then negatively correlated with their market share. We also find that 55% of the builders have this provider, which we call as an exclusive provider, which is a provider that is only significant for a single builder. These like columns with a single color cell indicate this. We use some machine learning models to detect this. So like you can see like the classic Beaver built SCP or rsync Wintermute here, but also other searcher and builder integrations. And we see that builders who have such kind of providers are actually more profitable in general than the builders who don't, because the idea is that if you have order flow that the others cannot access or don't have, then you can keep profits and you can simply become more profitable. And then finally, we use all these features that we initially identified and looked at which ones are correlating with market share and which ones are correlating with profit margin. And we see that there are a lot of overlaps, and actually there is a positive correlation between these top 10 builders' market share and profit margin as well. And like the result we converge into is that there is this chicken and egg problem, which also other works have highlighted. That is like, if you want to be profitable, then you need to access order flow from these providers, which are usually not really providing order flow to everyone else. So it's like kind of differentiating you, but then only builders with high market share can get access to such order flow. And yeah, in the paper, we discussed some solutions for protecting Ethereum's censorship resistance and neutrality, which Mike also mentioned. And yeah, again, I'm just summarizing our contributions here. And the paper will be featured in AFT this year. And this is the archive link for the paper. And that's going to be all for now. Thank you.
I have a question. My understanding of the Telegram bot arrangement is that there is some refund that happens. Do you think that your methodology is overestimating the importance of Telegram bot flow because it just counts like what you can see on chain?
Exactly. That's a limitation that we also mentioned. So like the Titan profits, for example, we showed that's for sure an overestimation because they probably pay back some amount. It's hard to, I guess, estimate like what is the ratio there. But definitely, that's like a nuance that we need to consider, that like that on-chain payment that is done by, say, Banana Gun to Titan is definitely not just Titan keeping all of it. So yeah, it's definitely like an overestimation.
Do you think there's some way to maybe tease out what the actual fair value they have for the block is based on their bidding behavior? Or
good question. I think it's like we need to look at the frequency of this order flow appearing in blocks and like when it occurs, and potentially this might indicate something about like how much they value, or like what is the significance of that order flow. But yeah, I don't know. I have to look into, like, one thing I looked into was especially for some subsidizing searcher builders, like why are they subsidizing? And we actually see that when they have their searcher flow in blocks, they subsidize much heavier than when they don't, which then if you take the difference, you can think it as, okay, this subsidy difference could potentially be their searcher profits, upstream.
I think there's two layers of answers to that question. So like, first of all, if this always going to be a closed door deal and the payment is happening off chain, then it's impossible for us to really identify what C value our distribution are. But also like, what is the fair value? I think even right now with the basically the integration or like the payment for order flow between this kind of arrangement, there may not paying the fair value. They might be overpaying until there might be competition between the builders who are basically handling the order flow. So I think that can be also interesting with some like redistribution refunds kind of research as well. Yeah.